Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew. I'm coming to you from Underworld North Studio here in Toronto, and as always, I'm joined from across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing okay. It is a little hectic for me, but outside of that, I'm doing pretty good, decent. So yay.
That's good way. Good to hear. Good to hear. The weather here, yeah, kind of late September. It's still pretty summery. I was out in shorts. That's fine. It's fine. Good way to be. But also today, let's get more serious now. Today is National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And it's part of what many it's Algonquian-Iroquois people call Turtle Island. So it's not across the continent. On the other side of the shell, the turtle shell, they call what we call North America. They call Turtle Island. And on this day, we're encouraged. I'll say a little more about it a little later on, but today we're encouraged to reflect on the experience of Indigenous peoples, especially in what we call Canada, but also throughout the world. And so stories set in the galaxy far, far away have definitely taken up this call in various ways with mixed success. And so prompting nowadays, hopefully, further education, reflection, and action in the real world. And so this week we follow the trail and discuss Indigenous narratives in Star Wars. We'll get to that in just a bit. First off, we get the plugs out of the way. You can follow us at Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. That's mostly on Twitter. Of course, the Underworld Facebook page is where we also post a bunch of updates and whatnot. Yeah, and of course, Underworld Facebook, Underworld Twitch, Iron Canon Twitch. You can also get all your podcasts, all podcast love there too. Here on YouTube though, Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, we have threads. I'm reading the notes weird. We have memberships, we have super chats, so please feel free to support the channel in that way. If you comment through the normal course of our conversation, and we'll do our best to slot in the comment. If you super chat us, if you support the channel, it bumps the comment to the top of the pile, and we'll get to it as soon as humanly possible. We are grateful for any support you can provide to the Underworld channel, Underworld Network, and everything we do here at the Star Wars Underworld, at Iron Canon, etc. Also, speaking of Underworld, we got the Discord server. So down in the notes right below us, yeah, I guess right below us too. There's a link for entrance into the Discord server. I think kindly invited by Joel Davis, and it's funny when I do the link for Tractor Beam, it also says invited. Joel Davis is inviting you to the Discord server. So there we go. Why not? So yeah, lots of conversations going on there. All sorts of Star Wars conversations, Marvel, Star Trek, etc., including events. And Joel, I think there was an event recently. Of any other things going on in the Discord?
Yeah, last week played some Star Wars Hunters. I always mix Hunters up with Outlaws. I did this time. We played
Very
that.
different games, but similar.
Yes, very different games. So we did that. Also we did. I think that was kind of it. So nothing this week. Next week probably another game night. So look out for that.
There we go. And yeah, so please do check that out. Join us. Tag Joel, tag Ben, and specifically homework for you. Ask Ben what he wants for his half birthday, is what you need to do in the general.
Or his birthday party.
His half birthday party is, I know exactly when that is. It's also my half birthday. So it's just under a month from now. So yeah, and then, yeah, so I mean, I'm in there too. If you want to tag me, I'm in EG1138. And ask me what I want for my half birthday. We'll see. There we go. I'll be sure to answer you. Anyways, also last plug to get there. The Tractor and Comics reviews. Wednesdays are for comics. Comics are for Wednesdays. And so this Wednesday, right here on the Underworld channel and Facebook and Twitch. 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We were gonna talk about Chris Abbott and I are gonna talk about all the comic books that came out that day. There are two coming out. One's Inquisitors number 4, so the end of that Inquisitors run for now. See how Tensu Run does. But more importantly, Battle of Jakku, Insurgency Rising number 1, the first installment of what is either maybe the bridge into the new phase or just the new phase of comics, full stop. Definitely a momentous week in comics, a very important week Joel, you're definitely hooting and hollering silently there.
Yes.
Are you gonna pick up Battle Jakku? Are you gonna give it a read?
Well, I probably won't pick it up physically, but I have my ways of finding things, so I'm definitely gonna be keeping up with it in my
Oh yeah,
unique way.
that's good to
Uh, but yes, I'm excited. I'm hyped. It can be bridge, start, whatever. It's like I'm just excited,
Yes.
man.
Speaking of which, Joel and I know Chris, you're right there watching. Joel, I'll make you a deal right here on YouTube if you keep up with it. If we do a special look back on the Battle of Jakku, just all 12 of our issues. If you keep up with it by then, you can come on Tractor Beam and we'll have a grand old time looking back on the whole arc. There we go. Make that commitment to you right on YouTube with Chris watching there. There we go. So yeah, very excited, very very again meaningful. I didn't end up watching didn't get to watching Return of the Jedi, but that's okay. I know what happens in it. We're talking about what happens in it, but also to say
Darth Vader dies.
Darth Vader, no, Anakin Skywalker returns. More important.
Spoilers.
Also to say, while we're at it, New York Comic Con is in 2.5 weeks, actually. But I'm going to be in New York in 2 weeks, so you might see a bit of a phone style, Dominic style phone cameo in 2 weeks. Really looking forward to that. Chris and I will have coverage. Still got to figure out sort of what we do. Maybe we'll figure it out on the fly. No, we got to plan it out. What we're gonna do. But yeah, it's looking forward to lots of comic book conversations. Some really important panels. I'm there is one. There's the kind of smaller. It's kind of a Dark Horse Star Wars comics panel that I'm sadly not going to because it's at the same time as the major Star Trek panel, and so weighing the two options. But Chris will be there. Chris will be at the Star Wars comics panel, and then as he says, there is the big Kahuna, the Star Wars publishing panel where we will line up for. We're definitely going to get into see that and then have as immediate reaction as we can on that because like I said, like I've been hoping, like we've been saying, what is next for comics and Star Wars comics, and all signs are pointing to. I'll be disappointed if they don't give us something, give us a sense of what is actually happening. So, yeah, hopefully, they actually give us some news there. So, yeah, New York Comic Con 2024. Last year, I said this on the flagship during the trivia thing. My favorite fandom memory of 2023, my favorite fandom moment, my favorite Star Wars moment of 2023 was hanging out with Chris, hanging out with my friend Ash, who's also been on Iron Canon, going to these great panels, book panels, lots of different comic book and Star Wars novel news that comes out of this con, and so it's like celebration level, but specifically just for books. They don't necessarily do celebration level stuff for Star Wars at New York Comic Con. They do other things. It's the whole Lord of the Rings. I got into the Rings of Power. Did I get into the Rings? I got into the House of the Dragon panel as well. So, yeah.
Did you start? Are you on season 2 of Rings of Power? Are you
yes, I'm caught up.
Oh, nice.
I'm caught up. It's fantastic. There's a Bear McCreary panel. Just this is a complete tangent here. There isn't much. I don't think there's really any much in terms of Rings of Power. Major panels I can't see. I might be wrong. There isn't like a major panel with actors, but there's Bear McCreary, the composer, who's done lots of work. I think he did Battlestar Galactica too. So yeah, lots. That'll be fun. I got into that one as well. So yeah, looking forward to that. So yeah, any most likely anything anything immediate, probably anything Star Wars. I'll probably actually got the keys to the Twitter car for the Underworld Twitter car, so I'll probably post directly to that. But
post on the Ion Canon Twitter.
Yeah, I'll probably retweet different things there. But yeah, and then also do the whole Ben will be Ben is on notice to post things later on if he feels, and probably it's probably stories. I'll probably post stories. So anyway, keep it locked on all our socials across the network socials and the UC socials for anything goings on at New York Comic Con. because we'll be there representing the network, representing Tractor Beam, of course. Wherever I go, it's also the Iron Canon podcast. So check that out. Really looking forward to planning my walk down Manhattan, planning my schedule. Yeah, it was fun. So, anyways, that's 2 weeks from now in Star Wars. How about this week in Star Wars? Joel, you wanna take it away?
Yeah, so this week in Star Wars. So, off camera and a little bit on camera, Matthew and I had a bit of debate about the stormtroopers. And why is it that
Not of a
sometimes...
debate. Hold on, it wasn't as much of a debate. It was just I was unsure what was happening. What's going on?
Okay, so
What
we're
is it?
uncertainty about the stormtroopers and why
Yeah.
sometimes we don't see, why we see sometimes Imperial soldiers without the stormtrooper armor and sometimes we do. Well, thankfully, a little book called Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire by a Mr. Chris Kemshaw, and in Universe,
Beaumont Kim.
Beaumont Kim, has clarified this for us. So finally, here it is in his words. What's going on? So this is on page 110 to 111. This is a chapter about the Imperial military, and he's talking about how the Empire is phasing out the clones as it builds the new order military. Here we go.
Mhm.
Here we go. All military branches face issues regarding the phasing out of the clones and the need to recruit or conscript replacements. For the Army, virtually the entirety of the fighting infantry would need to be replaced with the new personnel after Emperor Palpatine's introduction of the Imperial Stormtrooper program. While we now consider the Imperial Stormtrooper to have effectively been ever present within the ranks of the military and on thousands of different worlds within the Empire, there was a time when they were relatively scarce. Stormtroopers were initially intended to be the elite corps of the Imperial military. However, training new recruits, as well as we will see, took a good deal of time. Ordinary civilians lacked the instincts and abilities that were included within the clone forces from the point of view of their creation. For many years, the stormtroopers remained relatively few in number. The Empire made use of other forms of infantry, such as regular Army Corps troopers and specialized variants, including the Mud Troopers, who slogged through the way across Mimban. Conflicts and crises had to escalate through numerous levels of military internal ranking criteria before they would be considered serious enough to justify stormtrooper deployment. Members of the ISB could request stormtroopers when necessary, but as seen in the Imperial forces deployed on the unfolding riot on the remote planet Ferrix, even as late as 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, there remained a divide between the security forces, regular army troopers, and stormtroopers. By the time of the Galactic Civil War, however, stormtroopers had been almost entirely incorporated as the primary infantry of the Empire and were regularly deployed to the systems across the galaxy, while also manning countless starships of the Imperial Navy. So there you go.
There we go.
They cleared that up.
Gradually phased in. I mean, I'm trying to square that with Bad Batch. What we see there.
Palpatine announces the Stormtrooper Corps replace the clone troopers, but they can't train them fast enough, so we gotta get others in the meantime.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so maybe yeah. From what I hear, oh sorry, I didn't have decaf. From what I hear, then that the idea was that they'd be the elite, but it didn't work out, and so they just said make them all stormtroopers.
Pretty much.
Or did they? Is it that they expanded the system, expanded the program, the training, the discipline? Not the targeting practice, but maybe not. That's a joke. That's a meme. But not.
Well,
but,
more like they cheapened out and they just like, keep putting. We need more stormtroopers, so everyone get in there.
Yeah.
Your training gets reduced to 2 days. There you go. Buckethead. There you go.
So, like similar strategies, TIE Fighter.
Yes.
Send in thousands of cheap cannon fodder to overwhelm, like the Separatists. I mean, that's the thing. The B1s. That's the idea of the B1s, right? Is well, that's where the Empire gets the idea of the B1. Gets the idea of stormtroopers, not from clones. Clones are expensive. Clones are hella expensive, and they're all effectively elite, even the regs. But yeah, it's the from the B1s. I mean, I'm just cluing into that now. George is saying these things happen. And then that's kind of the military mentality of, it's not, they're not just machines anymore. They're actual sentient beings that the Empire is saying, hey, you 5,000 of you, if 4,000 of you die, well, glory to the Empire.
Pretty much.
Great. I don't know. What did you find striking about that quote?
Oh well, first off, I found it interesting that it's sort of it is building off the old legends idea where the stormtroopers were going to be. Because again, like I talked to you about
Yeah,
before, the idea was the stormtroopers are the elite, fanatic, loyal to the emperor. Again, the stormtrooper based off the Nazi
right.
stormtrooper, who were of course Hitler bodyguard, and then expanded to the personal fanatical, the most fanatical, soldiers of the compared to the regular German army, the Wehrmacht, and the
Right.
rest. So I thought that was interesting, but I also think it was interesting that they sort of reconciled that with the fact that why do we always see stormtroopers set on screen all the time? And it's like, oh well, by that time, it's like,
Yeah.
especially by the time of the original trilogy, it's like the Empire are just using them now for everything. It's like, what kind of made them special? That just like, nah, we want loyalty over skill. So here
Right.
you go, everybody's a stormtrooper now. There is no real distinction between the loyal Imperial stormtroopers who directly serve the Emperor and the grunts of the Imperial Army.
Mhm.
So that I found that interesting. It's something I always thought was true,
Yeah.
but now it's just nice to see it in official canonical wording from the great book that is Rise and Fall of the Galactic
Yeah.
Empire.
I need to dive into it. I need to really sink my teeth into it.
I wanted to find a good paragraph, by the way, of Crimson Dawn, but it's so hard. So really just
Yeah.
have to read the whole chapter.
Yeah. I should read it. I kind of um that what you had mentioned about Crimson Dawn with the kind of the Empire's paranoia kind of jogged my mind for last week on Tractor Meeting where we looked back on the whole era and I went through the whole story and yeah, I should actually do something like that. But yeah, it's interesting again to think, the idea of those elite troops. They're still the Empire does have elite troops. The idea seems to be taken in on by say Death Troopers and mentioned the Mud Troopers. I guess the Mud Troopers are sort of elite. I mean, they have to either they're elite or they're more cannon fodder, like you do, like Han failing his flight training, and so he's stuck doing the literal dirty work.
That
But
big mud trooper seems to be more like just cannon fodder compared to the
yeah,
Death Trooper.
yeah, Death Troopers, Shock Troopers, but no, those are clones. But the uh,
Well, the
there's an
Coruscanti
Imperial Mud Troop-
Guard are certainly probably get a little extra
Yeah,
training because
yeah. I mean, so there's still like an Imperial Stormtrooper that is a Shock Trooper. Their
yeah,
their uniform isn't as nice as the Phase 2 Coruscant card, but
there
nothing.
are certainly stormtrooper corps that are more probably better trained, like probably like I think the book probably goes into this, but
Yeah,
like Vader's legions are probably the best of the best because Darth Vader only accepts the best of the best
yeah,
or you're dead. But it's like Legion 300 randos that might have some stormtroopers. It's like, yeah,
yeah.
here you go, stormtroopers. Yeah, we gave them 3 weeks of training. There you
Mhm.
go.
This is an incredibly nerdy discussion. We are going to get talking about the ethics of all this and the deeper ideas of all this in just a bit. Don't worry. But yeah, it never hurts to have a little fun, nerdy conversation. Again, I will say the Imperial Shock Troopers uniform is not as nice. Design is not as nice as the Republic Shock Trooper clone Coruscant Guard Phase 2 because none is. Nothing is. It's the greatest trooper design in all of Star Wars. So officially, objectively, no, just my favorite. Anyways, yeah. Any more thoughts on that or the
Nope. It's just one of those nice little clarifying things
yeah
that I've sort of always thought that was true. But again, it's nice to kind of be able to read it in a paragraph and like, oh, okay.
yeah man that book is so it's I've read 2 chapters of it. It's such an easy read in a good way, in the best way.
Mhm.
But uh doing other things such as Padawan's Pride, which I finished, and then Tears of the Nameless. I'm about 13 chapters in. So yeah, Padawan's Pride, this audiobook that I finally finished. It hit just at the exact time where I had access to a car, so I was able to drive around Toronto and listen to it. And yeah, I gotta say it really holds together nicely. It's too bad it didn't have more publicity because it actually deserves it. It actually is really well done, really well acted, voice acted. I really should have written down who does that, but um but yeah, it really it's exciting and riveting. It has the whole 9 yards of a Star Wars audiobook, right? The the sound effects and the music and the different voices. The one voice reader does this different voices. Oh, sorry, does them really well. It's a British, I guess, reader, voice actor, whoever, who sounds more like Obi-Wan, but it does all the American accents as well. So that was North American, whatever accents as well. So that was really well done. Very clearly distinguishable. Obviously, also a Pike accent and a Hutt accent, a Hutt who speaks Basic. And the big thing I'll say though, I'll say not though. The big thing I'll say is this book, and it's a young adult for sure, but it does precisely. Here's the best thing I can say, but it does precisely what it set out to do. It is a fun, exciting adventure that delivers a very key character beat for Anakin when he's around 12, 13. And that is, and it's amazing that it's being given this character beat, and that is it really introduces us, really has Anakin himself confront within himself the tension between his kind-hearted, devoted to his caregivers, devoted to his mother and to Padme and to Obi-Wan. Padme doesn't have much of a mention here because he's 12, right? But to Shmi and to Obi-Wan especially, and the promise of becoming a Jedi that we see in Phantom Menace, but also, remember, he's a pod racer. He's already breaking some rules and going on some joy rides and putting himself and others in danger recklessly. And that tension, that kind of rebel without a cause, that element too. And what this book really does, it really introduces, it's the first moment where he seeks to bring the two together. That struggle, of course, is going to continue on for the next 10 years of his life, culminating in Revenge of the Sith. I mean, it continues on all the way, in a way, you could say, to Return of the Jedi, where he has to rebel against his authority figure in order to save someone he loves. Just to rebel against Palpatine in the moment, to do something seemingly reckless. And that's another way of it helps. And this Padawan's right. It's reframing, having all the comics in mind, right? The Return of the Jedi era comics in mind that have just finished. He does this thing that's kind of reckless, chucking the Emperor over the ledge, right? And at the risk of his own life, but in this case, in order to save the one he loves, now save his son Luke. And in a similar way, I won't give away the details, but Anakin's kind of adventuresome, not quite recklessness, but thrill seeking is part of what saves the day here in this story. And so, really, again, really exciting, really gripping, fun story that, Star Wars at its best. I say this all the time. Star Wars at its best is a grown-up story with grown-up important themes that is delivered in a way that younger audiences can grasp. And so I definitely recommend it. Joel, I don't know if you've checked out Padawan's Pride yet.
Nah, I'm still going through Temptation before.
Okay,
I got a good chunk of it. So
yeah. So yeah, fair enough. I definitely recommend it. It's free if you have an Audible subscription. I think that's the case. So yeah, check that out. Last but not least, I'm about, like I said, about 13 chapters into Tears of the Nameless, and I make kind of as a joke or as just a way of making a point, a lot of Star Trek references on this podcast, just saying I really should consider some sort of ad hoc Star Trek podcast. But this one, I won't spoil anything. I'm only 13 chapters in. Reith the scientist, yes, Reith the historian, Reith the the Jedi Knight, who's the historian of Jedi mysticism and dark side lore, student of not incorporating the dark side, although interesting interactions with Azul and Rel in this book, but also Reith the scientist. And I was really struck by the element of the Gene Roddenberry vision of the Gene Rod, yeah, as opposed to the George Lucas vision, the Gene Roddenberry vision of let's actually use science and reason and common endeavor, the common reason to approach a problem, to be a part of resolving this problem. And I just read a part where finally making this, it's funny, it's taken this all this time for people to start talking about characters, start really talking about the connection between the blight and the nameless. And so this is slightly spoiler, but that you see him, it's through science, through reason, that he's able to kind of see or at least start bringing out that connection. And so, I won't tell you what that connection is, but yeah, it's fascinating to consider. Yes, within George Lucas's space fantasy vision, it's similar to saying, here's a theology point, within any kind of theological or spiritual, mystical reflection, way of living, scientific insights are always welcome if they have something to say. We don't chuck out our brains. And so, yeah, I was surprised by that. I was surprised by the amount of time we see Reith in a lab in this book so far, early on. So very, very interesting. And again, this could be, if it weren't for weird force things, weird force eater creatures, this could be a Star Trek thing or some other kind of hard sci-fi. But
yeah, Tim Zahn was doing that in the 90s.
I know, but
he did it. Tim Zahn did it first.
But this feels more authentically Star Wars still,
I haven't read 1990 Day of the Empire.
No, I haven't. But I mean, especially using science in labs. Baron Bulin does it in a weird, gobbly-gooply, freaky way, kind of the horror way. Here's Reith doing it in I think a very, very Star Trek way. Why not? Right? If it works, if it's part of the way forward, part of turning the tide, then I'm here for it. I don't know if you have any. Yeah, I know you said Zahn. I don't know if you have anything more to say about it, but
nope, I'm good. I got nothing. I haven't read it yet. I'm waiting for it to come on audio.
Yeah. Chris has his on the Star Trek channel, has his review. Everything you said to me is over the top hype. So he absolutely loved this book. So looking forward to more. It's the one I've been waiting for 4 years. It's Reith actually stepping up and saving the day. So why not? My guy Reith. All right, last bit before we get to the main topic. Bit of news, video game news. Here, and I know the flagship talked about this as well, but might as well, Joel, you wanted to bring this up, so here we go. The Games Radar reporting that the third Jedi game will be the last, and the article from Games Radar quotes, I'm quoting here, Laura Mealy, who's president of entertainment technology at EA, I'm not too sure. Well, Eddie, I'll get to that question in a minute. Discussed the series as part of the company's future plans. Quote from Mealy here. Don't know how to pronounce her name, but anyway, over 40 million Star Wars fans have connected with Cal Kestis and his arc of becoming a powerful Jedi. She said, Respawn is working hard to bring the final chapter of this thrilling story to players. So we have Fallen Order and Survivor, and then it looks like this third installment will be the last. One question I have, maybe this is just me not understanding the video game industry. Why is this coming from EA and not Respawn? Is Respawn a subsidiary of EA?
Yes.
Okay, that's why. Okay, never mind. So that's why. But yeah, that third game. Trying to think. It makes sense. We've lived with this character for quite a bit. We've had lots of time with him. It'd be curious, like, where does this happen? I mean, the end of Fallen Order. Spoiler alert, the holocron with all the Jedi kids is destroyed. Although we know Jocasta Nu also has the records.
When she that's right. She's dead already though.
Yeah, but there's got to be lists somewhere. Then in Survivor, Cordova and Sears Archive on Jedha is destroyed by Vader. Uh, you know, what I'm wondering is when is this set? What happens? I know there's that. And also, I mean, everything with that hidden planet with the High Republic connection. When is this set? What is kind of the ancient tie? So an ancient tie back. If there is one, what kinds of patterns will this continue and make for a good ending? I trust it. Both these stories have been fantastic, and so looking forward to what happens. Does Cal survive after? Does he survive to Yavin? Is he on Yavin? Does he survive to Endor? Is there some connection with Inferno Squad? Who knows? When is this set? Is it set before Yavin? Could be set before Yavin. Still got time.
I think it is. I wouldn't be surprised if this is all set before Yavin.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
I think it'd be an interesting idea though if it was set kind of after. If they could tie it into the comics the way Outlaws has, not in the same way, but to the same extent, maybe.
Maybe. I don't think they're going to though. I feel like Cal the Dark Times character.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Although, I mean, New Hope, anything before Return of the Jedi is Dark Times. Really, anything before Battle. Oh, yeah, especially Return of the Jedi. So, who knows? But I guess why, then the same question that comes up with everybody, why is he not part of the rebellion? He already knows Saw Gerrera.
I don't know. They can justify that. Maybe he dies. Maybe he goes off and looks for the Zepho.
That would be great. Actually, that's what I want now. There. Anyways, what do you think of this being the last and all this news?
Oh, I'm not shocked. Star Wars loves its trilogies. 3 nice games. Probably that's probably the way to go. I guess that's sort of the question is where does Cal end? And there's always rumors floating around about Cal's future. It's like, he's so popular. It's like, are they gonna axe him off, or are they gonna, kind of like with Kira in the comics, just kind of keep her on the playing field, just in case we want to do something, be it Disney Plus or films or something, whatever. Maybe a little something there, or are they like, okay, yep, it's time to go because he's not in the film, so
right,
time to kill him off the George Lucas way.
Right.
Who knows, right? Like that's I guess that's kind of the $1 million question, and we'll find out. And if he's like, well, if he lives, what is the good enough reasoning? Because you can only say X is alive so many times without coming up with a reason. Unless he decides just to retire, which doesn't seem like he would. It seems like he would probably go out.
Yeah.
He wouldn't just drop the lightsaber and live off with Mare and run the Empire still up and functioning. I guess the Bad Batch kind of did that, but they're clones. They can do
that. Barriss kind of does that.
That's true. And we don't know what happened to her, really.
Yeah.
Again, we don't know what happened to Barriss after we found out what happened to Barriss.
Yeah.
Sure. So I don't know. I guess that is the $1 million question: is what is the future of Cal Kestis? Obviously, they have to. I think they're going to complete an arc. I think all 3 games will make here's a full arc for this character.
Yeah.
If you want it to end, it can end. Maybe we'll keep him alive if he can continue, but for now, it's just this full arc. But yeah, I'm kind of curious what the heck the story is for Jedi Fallen 3. What's there to do? What's left to do for Cal?
Yeah, it's a question. What's left to do? He's kind of in the first one. He's kind of like Padawan to Knight. The second one, he's definitely clearly Knight, who's tempted by the dark side. Third one, maybe, yeah, maybe.
Who do we fight? Who's the baddie? Are we gonna fight the Emperor or new baddie?
Who knows? Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe kind of this, moving towards mastery, because we haven't really seen much of that, right? At least in video games.
Right.
Like we haven't really seen a knight become a master. Have we actually ever seen a knight become a master? Like actually seen a story? We've seen Padawans become knights all the time.
No, I don't think so. I don't know if we count
That'd
Luke,
be
but I
fascinating.
don't. It's like Luke's kind of.
I want to see that just somewhere. I want to see that happen somewhere. I've never seen that. I want to see Obi-Wan. When does he become a master?
Right.
The question, when if he's off looking for the Zepho, then we're gonna need a fourth story somewhere for him to come back and tell us what he found. you know, uh, unless this is the game, is him actually going off and looking for the Zepho. At least maybe the first act is still something to do with our galaxy, and then I mean, now that the galaxy is being so opened up by Ahsoka, why not something else happening? Um, in another pocket of space somewhere. I mean, that's another thing that Zahn did with the Ascendancy trilogy, especially is really open up the galaxy more. And so, sorry, that there's definitely room there. So, yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, all that to say, anyone who's watching later, listening later, whatever, comment boxes down below. Let us know what you think. When do you think this is set? When do you think? What do you think is going to be carried on from the previous stories? What do you think might be new? What do you hope for? What do you look for? Comment boxes ain't going anywhere, as I will say again at the end. Any last thoughts on this one?
Nope, but I put it in here because if we consider video game paper canon, then we should probably talk about this.
That is true. That is true. Fun times. Alrighty then. Let's dive into our main topic here. And yeah, as mentioned off the top, I said I'd give a brief background on the Truth and Reconciliation Day and what that is, and why that is, and also
Why we have an orange border over
why we have an orange border, and that's
our
very important.
thumbnail?
Why?
Because people have asked.
I mean, she's not, Afro Chile isn't necessarily indigenous, but yeah, and so Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada. And another word, Canada, even in this context, is complicated because this is a colonial thing we're doing here. But
What
also,
is the native name of whatever you consider what is considered Canada? What is like its
so Turtle Island is North America. The thing is, there's 600 something in First Nations within the current borders of what we call Canada, and so
I just learned the native name of New Zealand today,
yeah,
a couple days ago.
yeah, Aotearoa. So yeah, that's a little different because they're very defined islands, and so
Well, that's how
yeah,
you pronounce it, Aotearoa.
Aotearoa, yeah.
If my
Yeah.
friend's listening, hello.
Yes. Hello from another part of the world. Yeah, and so I'll give a bit of background. Um, so just like in South Africa, we also had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was set up to hear the stories of Indigenous people, just as the momentum kept growing to actually tell these stories. Because, as I've mentioned before, if the original sin of the United States was slavery, the original sin, slavery of the black population, the original sin in Canada was the residential schools, primarily residential schools, but also day schools. And that, the colonial governments, and then after 1867, the Canadian government, allied with different churches and different organizations, basically took these kids from their families, from the reserves, from their parents, and said, you can't speak your language, you can't practice your culture, you're going to be regimented into this very white Christian way of living. Now, a lot of them were probably already Christians because this is part of the missionaries before, but now it was taken to an extreme of extreme degradation and basically slave labor and violence of all sorts, oppression of all sorts. And we've known that for a number of years. We'd known that for a number of years. We're started to hear more and learn more about that. Survivors and their children and their grandchildren starting to tell the story, because the effect of it was devastating. We call it a cultural genocide, because the effect of it was to take these thriving societies and cultures from across the continent, really. And there were residential schools in the U.S. It just hasn't been as much of a focus. Um, thriving cultures and whittle them down to very small communities that weren't really able to be part of what this new Canadian society was, but also not able to be autonomous on their own because they're really rich land, rich resources, oil, forestry, lumber, and weren't able to necessarily even profit off of the extractive nature of those industries, which, as they should, it's right their land, they have the right to those profits. But especially to all but eliminate their culture and their languages. So cultures are extinct, languages are extinct. But thankfully, the ultimate genocide, like an absolute genocide, failed. And it was a genocide in terms of the scale was drastically reduced, but the in spite of the best efforts of my church and other churches and the Canadian government and the British government, people started to learn their language anew and tell their stories anew and learn their heritage and culture anew. And so, this Truth and again, like South Africa, Truth and Reconciliation Commission was set up to actually hear these stories of these survivors and what happened to their culture and recapture their culture. And there were a number of calls to action that were called out in terms of even reparations, or at least a plea deal to say, different churches and governments will fund education initiatives and restoration initiatives and whatnot. One such call to action I actually got to see today was in public places, make monuments and gardens and places for reflection on the Indigenous experience. And so I went to Toronto City Hall today, and there's a brand new garden things. It's pavement, but a monument basically set up for us to reflect on those experiences. This all has really hit the mainstream, hit public consciousness a few years ago. There's an excavation of one of these schools in British Columbia in Kamloops, and it was discovered that hundreds of unmarked graves of children were discovered, and like the remains of these kids, and the effect of that on our national consciousness, on our white settler Canadian consciousness was, oh no, like it took off like wildfire to say we have to. It caused a shift in our awareness of this. Hopefully a lasting shift. And so that truth and reconciliation isn't necessarily just a commission. It is just a day. It is a day on September 30th, but part of our
make it a whole year.
Make it an integral part of who we are as a country, right? And so one of the things is people wearing orange T-shirts, and a lot of people wearing orange T-shirts on Thursdays, or maybe red T-shirts. So here's another thing that happened was reports of missing and murdered Indigenous women from reserves, specifically women, targeting women, and the specific gender-based violence that Indigenous people face. Also, what they call two-spirited, which is a lot of their nations' way of talking about queer identity. The specific discrimination they face, and the celebration of their gifts and talents and lives. So, a whole set of changes, shifts, concerns that come to bear. And so today, it happened to be today on a Monday, that we mark this specifically. I'm fortunate, thankfully, that you just, even in my church, there's an elder who is a national leader, or at least a local leader on these, and so I can interact with him on the regular. But that's the thing, is to make this more visible. It was reserved on the reservations, and their suffering was reserved and up in the north. And now to see in Toronto City Hall, the like a gathering point of the biggest city in this country, for that to be a focus. Yeah, I don't know if that would have happened necessarily even last year or a few years ago, but here we are today. So high time. Hopefully that gives a good background. So truly, it's even like so a federal government statute said let's create this day, and so yeah, definitely something worth bringing up, something worth talking about. Lots of time again, make it part of what this country is about. Globally, we have this reputation for being collaborative and wanting the global greater good. Yes, we don't want to be both sides, or we want to be either or about this, to say let's also do this here at home and make our home multiple homes, recognize that this is a multiple homes in this one country, and so and multiple countries, if you want to put it that way, in multiple nations, and so yeah, to include and increase that conversation. So that's the real world in Canada. Star Wars.
Well, at least you have that in Canada. We don't even have this in America. We don't even reckon. Well, we try sometimes.
There's Juneteenth.
Yes.
Interestingly, Juneteenth, we do Juneteenth here too. But
although, from what I've been hearing about Canada, if America goes a certain way in November and you go a certain way in November, that seems like about to go away pretty quick.
Well, I mean, hopefully not. Hopefully, there's a critical mass of this. I was chatting with Din today, actually, and he said, actually, he was saying one of the things is Gord Downie tragically hit, one of the most important Canadian bands. Gordon Downie, before he died, they did a final concert, and he in front of 10 million of us, which is a third of the country, really bringing that to the forefront on that final concert, and the ability, and his ability, and a lot of others to make that, so to make that part of the national conversation. I think, there's a question of how much would the Conservative government actually do.
Look at what's going on in New Zealand, aka Victoria, where it's like they got a Conservative government right now. But what my friend has been telling me, they have not been nice to local.
And then also in Australia, from what I hear. So, again, it's tricky, but then again, so I do have this thing about. We'll get to this when we do our U.S. election special, but I might be all. That's it. I'm moving to America.
Unless we go south too, then it's sort of like, oh shoot.
Yeah, I don't. So anyway, so that's my spiel. Maybe I'll just quickly say also real world. Star Wars has spoken, and I'll let you take over when we talk about kind of in universe. But Star Wars has, for better and for worse, engaged this. There are some real world examples fairly recently, at least. I'm thinking specifically of the Navajo and Ojibwe screenings of A New Hope, which were fantastic moments, really investing in local talent and local artists, training them, helping them learn how to do voiceover, and make a film, they know how to put on these events. They know how to make films. They have artistic talent. But to say also, there's a reason why this was a great event. I mean, Star Wars has this universal appeal, and themes that Indigenous folks, Navajo and Ojibwe, and others can connect with. Also, speaking of Navajo, Rebecca Rowanhorse she's Navajo. She wrote Resistance Reborn. I think that's the only, from what I know, the only Indigenous author who's written a Star Wars novel, at least in canon. So, she got to do that capstone celebration of the canon thus far. That was a fun one. And then, of course, Timur Morrison, everything he's done to bring Maori heritage. Speaking of Aotearoa, bring his Maori heritage to everyone across the world, and it's very, very strong influence, especially on Boba Fett's character, and we'll get into that in just a bit. So, those are the real world. Anything strike you about this real world conversation?
No, I think it's important to have. I wish we had some made people here to talk instead of just two white dudes talking about this.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry. So we will try our best.
Next year.
Feel free to tell us in the comments. No, I mean I've learned a little bit, especially about Aotearoa lately, because again of my friend on a Discord server. So
Nice.
I learned the name, so that's very good, nice, and sort of what's going on there. Apparently, it's a very small island too. Apparently, everyone knows each other. It's pretty easy to meet Peter Jackson, and the Prime Minister. Apparently. Oh yeah. Hey, I mean, I could if I could go there and bump into Tim, I won't be like, hey Tim, like have your autograph. I probably won't go. But no, I hope Canada doesn't go the way of Aotearoa and vote in the people who are probably going to disband that Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
So the commission itself, I think, is finished its work.
Okay.
It's just that the calls to action, and that, I mean, we're already getting political here, but a lot of
it's a pretty political thing. So
that's true. A lot of what federal government does is blame other organizations, say, look at the churches that did it, and then churches can look at the government that did it. Thankfully, I can only speak for my own. I think we're
team effort.
That's the point. We all got to come together and face this. This isn't about driving. No one's going to come and evict me from my house the way we evicted them, right?
And also to say, the original sin was stepping on the land in the first place and getting rid of smallpox.
Yeah, there's that, and well, it's to going in the doctrine of discovery and going and saying this is our land now. It wasn't that no one was here, but I think like what I mean by original sin is like as in the most devastating specific policy and action, and so as part of the wider one. So anyway,
fair enough. All right, but let's get into nerdy stuff. Star Wars, awkward transition time.
That's right. There's in-universe stuff here.
In-universe stuff. All right. So, Star Wars' track record with Indigenous representation is mixed. And I would say mixed now because of some recent things.
Yeah.
If we were talking earlier, it would not be mixed. I would say probably bad. Because that's what you get for when it's still just a bunch of white dudes. Just writing stuff. I mean, if we want to talk about some bad representation, let's talk about Indiana Jones. That's not good. Look at that Raiders and the South American people. Yikes. Okay. So, oh boy. Yeah. So mixed. It's been mixed. Starting really with A New Hope and the Tuscans, because that A New Hope. And I learned this by our good friend Dr. Ferrick with the Rule Star Wars episode. Go watch that episode, by the way, after you're done with this good one. And how, Tatooine is very much the rural frontier of the galaxy where the local farmers just trying to make a living, but those barbaric Tuscans keep raiding their farms. Oh, what does that sound like? Yeah, not good. It's certainly questionable. There. Of course, I'll get to the original trilogy, and then we can talk about more Ron stuff. I do feel like George tried to do a bit of a redemption arc for himself with the Ewoks and later the Gungans. I would say they are somewhat mixed representation. I would say mixed in the sense that, again, I think as long as you're just white guys trying to do representation without actual, native input. I mean, I don't know how much there was any input. I'm sure the Jedi was there. But, at the same time, it's not like the Ewoks are bad. They're certainly good guys, the good guys. But, they certainly got a little bit of that, kind of stereotype, like stuff like that. Same with the Gungans. Although the Gungans again are a little bit more malleable, but I definitely can see the critique there. I do think the Gungans have a bit more of a respectable warrior side to them, of course, but again, leaning on stereotypes. It's not. I'm gonna be honest. It really, I do. I mean, I'm sure there's some EU stuff that probably wants to try to fix this problem to a certain extent, but where I don't know enough. But
It's
it's
the Outlander comic. There's a
Outlander
little,
comics a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah, Austriander comics a little bit.
yeah,
Attack of Clones is also weird. I'll just say because with the
mm,
Tuscans, because again, it's like those native savages, like people are
yeah,
like, they're just like monsters, and it's like Anakin slaughters them, but then it's like killed the women and the children too. So it's kind of that bit of a mixed messaging here of like they're monsters. We see Shmi, she got blood, but yeah, it's like Anakin's like, but they were women and children. So it's like
mm-hmm,
a little bit of mixed
yeah,
messaging here with that, because sort of like on the one hand, okay, we know Anakin killing women and children is not good, but at the same time, the only time we see Tuskens are them, whipping Shmi. We want to be happy for Anakin's mom. Um, so at least on screen, there's some stuff with the comics and legends, I'm sure, but on screen, we're going to stick with screen here. It really is until the Mandalorian
mm-hmm,
that I think our first real better version of representation for indigenous people begins with the Tuscans, ironically enough, where instead enough, I won't forget that. And I'll Mandalorian for a second, where we see Din, Din Djarin, talking with the Tuscan, guarding with them. He's like, "Hey, I'm gonna be respectful. I'm actually gonna be, do the sign language and stuff like that." Um, you know, uh, uh, so I think there is, that's the first time, and then obviously my favorite episode of The Mandalorian, well, one of my favorites, The Marshal, season two. We see the Tuscans as a peoples. They are the native people of the land. Even Din, I think, points out, hey, they've been here first. They've been here longer than you people have.
mm-hmm,
Settlers of Freetown or whatever it's called, Mos Pelgo or whatever. Cobb Van's place.
yeah, that one. Freak,
And and while it does play on the it's the rural farm settler farmers and the natives, this time it wants to be, instead of like, oh, those no good Tuscan barbarians, like, oh no, these are equal people. They're both here. They kind of have to live together now.
right,
It's not like you can just say, hey, move out of your house. Um, we have to work together to solve this big problem,
mm-hmm,
and let's solve it. And which again, all culminates with Book of Boba Fett, with with Tem and the Tuscans, and I'll get more into that in a bit. But I've rambled. So Matthew, any comments of kind of my my
yeah.
history of native Star Wars representations up to today, and I'm sure, well, maybe not today, but certainly up to good stuff.
Well,
The Mando.
recently enough, yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting to note that the Tuscans seem to have had the most content, the most almost growth, if you will, in terms, especially with Mandalorian, with the right, where we see them both times. I think, yeah, that's a really interesting point, important point in that rural farmer versus indigenous, cowboys versus Indians, and farmers versus indigenous tensions, which very very clear, for by the way, in Western Canada. Um, there's still a lot of animosity, and it's where the most denialism is, but it's also actually, oddly enough, where the most just bringing this a real world thing in Western Canada, where the most active reconciliation is going on, because indigenous people are actually a lot more visible, way more visible in the prairies, and way more visible in even prairie cities like Edmonton, Calgary, and Winnipeg, um, and especially Edmonton and Winnipeg, I think. So, yeah, it makes sense that they would have the most real estate here. What's interesting to track then is the shift in the reliability of the those Tuscans, those horrible Tuscans claim, right? Um, Owen Lars is meant to be a reliable character in his distrust of Tuscans, right? We got to deal with them. The droids, hey, what are you trying to pull with the bad motivator thing? We're supposed to feel that because we're feeling it from Luke's point of view, and yeah, and so they're kind of kind of mousy, weird characters that we don't want to deal with. Oh, I guess those are the Jawas. Maybe those are Jawas. I think the Jawas.
Tuskens are
the Jawas too are part of that. I guess I'm confused. Although I'm confused. Why did I confuse them? Interestingly,
I don't think Jawas are even native to Tatooine. Like
I know, but they're kind of treated. Yeah, and then you're right. The Tuskens, just these terrifying, brutal characters who, just want to club Luke in the head. And then on the pod race in episode 1, they're camping out, taking pot shots. That's all we get of them. Then with Attack of the Clones, we get this shift that you mentioned. And what the mention is that it is this mixed sort of, the brutal Ishmi, but Anakin's distrust of them and fear of them is less reliable. Right. It is coming from the dark side. It is the birth of Darth Vader in that moment, right? And so highlighting the potential, at least to say, chicken or egg, right? Who, why did they capture Shmi in the first place? Raises those questions. Raises the question, what are they afraid of? Are they afraid of something like this Darth Vader, this teenager, like I said, the reckless, going and taking them all out, having some of this kind of thing. Interestingly enough, and a bit of a side note, here's a plot thread that has never been followed up. It's one of the last moments, I think, of the Kieran Gillen Darth Vader run. Is that because of that moment, Vader's actually being turned into this deity that the Tuskens worship and sacrifice to. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of wild.
Maybe with that tribe, maybe the other tribe, they're like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, probably, but and then again, that's especially with the Mos Pelgo bit, the whole we can't trust Tuskens. It's thoroughly unreliable. It's wait a minute, what if there's more to this? And so, it's a really beautiful moment. What we see in Mandoverse in both of these stories, again, especially Book of Boba Fett. It's why I wish there were more. I wish there was more of this story. I wish this had been the whole series, frankly, because it was a fascinating story that could have shown a different angle and started to show a different angle. And so, it reveals a depth of thought about the Tuskens. I mean, that's just it. It's not like A New Hope lacks in depth of thought. It's just that George and the rest had other story to tell. So here we're finally getting some of this. I will say, that Outlander comic, Outlander, where the Jedi who basically goes undercover this is Legends, goes undercover in a Tusken community, and meets.
Oh, you're right. It's called Outlander. I was wrong.
Yeah, meets Asherad Head, who eventually becomes another Emperor Bell or something. I forget.
He's the Dark Lord of the Sith. He's just Darth Krayt.
Yeah, he becomes Darth Krayt. Okay. So that already started it. This was what, in the 2000s, I think.
He was a Jedi Tusken. And actually, there's some cool stuff with him and Anakin. It's like there's like tension where it's like, part Tusken, and Anakin's like, I got feelings, not nice feelings towards you.
Yeah. So, complicating the story to say, and again, the rural. That's a great point about the rural tensions, because that's often where this is mostly experienced. At least the conflict gets experienced, because it's both very land based and different conceptions of what land is for. Yes, land is for feeding, or in Tatooine's case, hydrating everyone. But because you can't really grow crops on Tatooine. But also, I mean, that's the thing, is there's the rural urban divide in the sense of where do people live, and do we call that empty space? And highlighting this conflict, even, and this is maybe a bit of an aside, but highlighting the conflict on rural territory reminds us city folk that also, well, yeah, people really live there. And so maybe if we started to address, I mean, when I was in rural Alberta, I wonder if one of the big, almost pathologies, if that's too strong of a word, but definitely the big worry was that city folk were going to come in and tell rural folks how to live. And of course, they were more open to letting big oil companies in Calgary tell them how to live than the government in Edmonton. But that frustration and taking over their way of life, I wonder if they kind of offloaded that frustration onto Indigenous communities and said, well, they're getting all, and so kind of accused them of getting all the perks from the government and just getting all the good vibes from the government when, maybe think the story might be more complex and just inventing a more complicated story, frankly. I even was listening to one guy who was all, oh yeah, their hockey team cheats, gets away with it. The Indigenous hockey team gets away with penalties. And I don't know if that's true or not, but probably not. Seems a bit far-fetched. So that kind of that kind of animosity, we need more reflection on that. And so it's to say Tuscans get the most real estate, and yet just only starting to really get these kinds of questions. Also, John Jackson Miller's Kenobi brings it up too, but also with more in line with I think what kind of earlier stories did. And so, yeah, I mean, anything set on Tatooine is going to eventually, but thankfully, the Mandalorian Book of Boba Fett really notably telling an Indigenous story. That was appreciated.
Yeah, go watch the Daughters of Ferrex episode on Star Wars Rule, because like Star Wars is a very rural franchise. It's
Yes. RURAL is what
RURAL, rural franchise. Sometimes it's hard to say.
It's hard to say.
Rural franchise, like as much as we love Coruscant and we want more Coruscant stories, Star Wars at its heart is about the farmers, the cowboys, people who live off the land, and very old school America. Much as we would love more Coruscant stories,
we're getting them, but anyway.
yeah, but yeah, that my point, right? It's all about the frontier.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess that's where Star Wars, Star Trek, classic Star Trek very much have their frontier. Maybe even the Mandalorian, it's like Din is a cowboy, kind of more or less, making his way. But unlike cowboys who do bad things to the Native Americans, he actually respects them. So good on him. And one thing I want to talk about. I know you want to talk about one thing. But I want to talk about something that's kind of real world, but also pants to this is I think something Star Wars has, and I think it got it. It always has, and because of that, that's why things like Tab, we love, can definitely there are implications there.
Yeah.
Star Wars has a bit of a thing, what I call colorblind casting.
Yeah.
Now, colorblind casting, for anybody who doesn't know, is for better and worse. Star Wars doesn't really care about your ethnicity or your race per se when they cast you. I hate to say it's merit. It's who the best person is, but it is kind of like it's like, hey, we're gonna get John Boyega to play this role, not because he's a person of color per se, but because you really like John Boyega. Very rarely I can tell where the casting. I'm sorry. Very rarely can you see where the casting's intentional. Like here's a great example of intentional casting. Guarantee you, Matthew, that the reason why the actress who plays Mother Anastasia and the senator who plays Senator Rancor, that senator dude who cuts to Vernestra,
Rancor,
are played by people of color.
Yeah,
that has to be intentional. That has to be very much a topical, like, hey, here's two people of color talking to the Jedi, who are basically the space cops. So that's a very intentional casting. I don't think Tem was necessarily intentional casting. I just think George liked Tem when he rehearsed, or I mean, I don't know. I actually don't know, and also because they were filming in Australia, so they get some not native Australian actors. But because of that, certain unintentional consequences happen.
Yeah.
And the intentional consequence with Tem, who we love, and I'm glad they have it, and I think you can do stuff with it, but a slave army of clones for the Republic who are all Maori.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Maori doesn't exist in Star Wars, technically speaking, but, come on. It'd be like if Finn was the clone template. Could you imagine all black clones it's close enough, and they're all Maori, native Maori people who are supposed to be the slave army to the Republic. And we kind of go places with that in later stuff, although again undercut because it's sort of like we do lighten their skin color, unfortunately, in the animated stuff, and Deep Bradley Baker is not Tem or Maori. But that does lead to unintentional consequences. And as much as I love that second episode of Book of Boba Fett, I think I don't know how much credit I want to give the writers, or just if they lucked out, because that story is easily a white savior story. If it weren't for the fact Tem was Maori and him saying certain lines very much can have a different weight on it compared to rando white guy saying those exact same things. Again, I don't know how much of I want to give the writers credit for knowing that, or is it just again they lucked out because Star Wars again has colorblind casting. So when they lucked out in a Maori actor saying those lines, it's like, okay, it's kind of still white saviorish because at the end of the day he's not a Tuscan. But, the allegory can still kind of be there because he's a Maori actor.
Yeah.
And obviously there's all the stuff like probably would happen in New and in let me call that native Ontario.
Aotearoa.
I'm so sorry. I keep butchering the name. Aotearoa.
I think so.
In Aotearoa. I mean, I don't know it, but I'm sure some stuff went down. It always goes down. And so
Aotearoa.
That very much has played an effect for better and worse, which is why, again, I hope we get some more native writers behind the scenes as well. So then we don't have to worry about, we have a native person playing this big role. Oh shoot, this actually causes some unintended thematic stuff that we didn't realize. Matthew, what are your thoughts on sort of that and the whole colorblind casting of Star Wars, and how that can lead to unintentional consequences?
I mean, it's there would be an easy out. They'd have an easy out of saying, "Oh, it's Star Wars." There are, discrimination falls along different lines than what they do in our world today. In the Roman Empire, it also fell on different lines. You could be black, you could be whatever, and you wouldn't have that much those same kind of barriers necessarily to success. Like some of those most prominent bishops, Augustine was black, but this is still telling a story to our real world today.
Right.
So it's true they need to pay more attention to it. I hope, and I'd like to think they wouldn't tell that story I think, they wouldn't tell that story if it were a white actor. Right? They wouldn't tell that story without Tem's insights. And he really does bring that to the fore in everything he brings, and the way he carries this character who, Jeremy Bulloch did a great job. And D. Bradley Baker was fantastic, of course. But, Tim Morrison is now Boba Fett, right?
But what do you know about the fact that the clone army's all Maori and that
Jeremy Bulloch.
They're a slave army.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I mean, there's nothing. Well, except to say, kind of what you were saying in that in later Clone Wars and into Bad Batch, they do start to address that. Right, start to address clone personhood. Almost to say, yeah, it's kind of realistic how the real world might happen, how it might happen in the real world. Conscripting, targeting one ethnic group for conscription. But yeah, it's true. It's problematic, but yeah, I can see part of maybe this is almost incidental. I don't know, but I think the point here is nothing's incidental. If it's the medium is the message, the content is the audience. If we're hearing a white American actor put on a Maori accent, Maori New Zealand accent, talking about clone individuality and personhood, then it's poignant and it's making meaning and doing what Star Wars, what all sci-fi does best. But Star Wars specifically raising these issues for the real world in a very allegorical way. I mean, I think it's part of what made the Clone Wars what it was, right? The way it took the time to address these things. It adds an extra dimension that I frankly hadn't thought of much. But if they had darkened their skin more, maybe if they had chosen a Maori actor,
or just got Tim back. Tim did voice the clones in other things. Yeah, Republic Commando.
Yeah, and of course in anything live action. So, even like he did in Ahsoka, he does Rex, right?
Right.
Or I guess, yeah,
he does the clone in Kenobi who just wants a
the begging, which is also, I mean, Indigenous veterans and Black veterans and homeless veterans generally, right? Not that all Indigenous veterans and Black veterans are homeless. Some of them are fine, but some of them aren't, and so, yeah. It's interesting again to say the whole Maori kind of slave clone army. Yeah, again, I hadn't thought of that, but again, thankfully they've taken the time to address it. If someone is horribly offended by that, fair enough. By the clone army and by Clone Wars and Attack of the Clones, fair enough. Again,
you can definitely see maybe a bit more Attack of the Clones where they don't really address it, just like here's the army, yay.
Again, I mean, even if George wasn't thinking on this level, Tem had to have, even back then. He was old enough, obviously. He was already an experienced actor. So, yeah, he willingly went through it. I mean, in a way, like Black actors telling stories of slavery and, signing up and getting, of course, duly paid and credited and everything. So, yeah, it's important to tell these stories. And again, it's important to tell the effect of, even if it's a victorious, triumphal story for the clones, ultimately it isn't, right? Ultimately, it's about the rise of the Empire. And in Bad Batch, we see the discarding of the clones. They address it in a way. I mean, there's got to be more time. They need to address it some more. There could be some more conversations about.
You can darken their skin color a little bit.
About that, but also even about, again, what happened to the clones afterwards and the tragedy of them all. The fact that a bunch of them joined the Rebel Alliance, and the ones we've seen, especially this guy right down here, he joins the Rebel Alliance, and there's a reason for that.
Omega's actress isn't native Maori, is she?
No, I think she's like
actually
Chinese, New Zealand, I think. So
anyway, but yeah, also, so there's that. One thing I also wanted to mention, and I didn't do it when I talked about our kind of ongoing Native representation. Because I always, I think my silly Star Wars brain kind of sees the Indigenous allegory in Aliens, because there's, that's how we started, right? The Tuskens are aliens, they're not human looking. The Gungans aren't humans. The Ewoks are teddy bears, right? They're the aliens. Alien equal indigenous people. It's the oversimplified Star Wars thing there.
Yeah.
Andor didn't do that. Andor actually decided to make the Aldani people just a native human culture.
And the white
Um,
skin mostly, right?
Mostly white skin show.
Okay.
Maybe not poignant there. But I will
Mhm.
say maybe where we could have cast it a bit better.
Yeah. Yeah.
For certainly. Um, I do think that what the actions of the story, though, very much
Mhm.
are quite representative of a lot of real world what happened in Canada, what happened here in America, what happened in every colony in
Mhm.
the world, where they're just gonna build over their stuff and slowly assimilate the culture with fancy imperial bars and
Mhm.
restaurants. I don't remember actually what the governor was talking about. It's been a while since I've seen that episode. It's like he was like,
Yeah.
"We're gonna like, hey, here's a rest stop. The Empire's nice, and we're gonna stop you from going to your special holy Starfield day."
Yeah.
Um, and then the governor's like, "Yeah, in a few next time next year, they're all gonna be dead or something like that.
Yeah.
They're all gonna be, destroyed or something horrible." And that's the empire. It's the slow erosion
Yep.
of the culture. It's never the thing about authoritarianism and dictatorship. It's never just like show up, mow it down, done. It's slow. It builds up. It almost seems nice, and yet you don't see the dark underbelly for years and years and
Mhm.
years. The decay. Sometimes you're in the decay right now and you don't realize it because decay is slow and
Right.
doesn't we might live a whole life in decay and would never realize it
Mhm.
until our grandkids. But it happens. But yeah, Matthew, I'll toss that one to you. What do you remember of the Andor episode in Aldani and thoughts on sort of the real world implications about that?
So the thing that strikes me most about that, frankly, is the festival. Oddly enough, maybe because the visual of it is so striking, right? And them
It's
flying
very
through,
pretty.
this thing, and how I mean, again, I mentioned that their white skin, it's also a reminder that um, Scots Irish and
That's
uh,
true.
you know, they're like Picts and all those people groups in on the British Isles, um, and even all the different language groups in Western Europe that have died out. Right, there are these ethnic heritages that a central government has actually kind of taken over, and it made me want, makes me think, again, it's complicated because I mean, I think going to the Synod of Whitby of all things, which is some very obscure tension between Celtic Christianity and Roman Christianity, and really Celtic identity and Roman identity in Britain.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's definitely that imperial base on Aldani is very much coded as colonialism, as we're here for the resources, we're here to. I mean, there's a reason that rebel cell is there to take it out, right?
Right.
Um, yeah, they want to hit the empire where they can, but yeah, it's definitely and get a good heist, get all those bars of gold press platinum. There's another Star Trek reference thing, but yeah, that's what it struck me. I mean, there's also that, and the Aki Festival on Pasana. Whenever we see instances of culture, uh, that kind of has. I mean, trying to think of like I don't know too enough about Diwali, but it sounds like that. Since that the British were present in India and um, you know really putting their foot down too. So yeah, it's again these celebrations of culture that don't well, especially with the Aldani, right? It's in the face of the empire. It's in the
Right.
face of this anxiety and uncertainty about whether they'll survive to see the next festival because uh their way of life, their identities are threatened by this invading force. So
Right. To go back to the white thing for a second.
yeah,
Well, we rightfully do talk about the colonialization of Africa,
yeah,
um, Aotearoa. Did I say it right?
Aotearoa.
Aotearoa.
I mean, you can say Australia, New Zealand. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. I want this
Mhm,
time. I don't know. And obviously, good old native North America.
mhm.
You know, white is a very loose term. Not all people were equal back then. But Irish people,
Yeah.
the Scottish. I look at Irish liberation. I remember talking to my buddy Reddit, Tony Gilroy talked about how he very much based the funeral in Ferrex off
Mhm.
of old IRA funeral marches
Sure.
and protests at the time. So you know, the Romans invaded the Brits, and Romans probably a little different, but at the same time, like they're still the conqueror.
Mhm.
So I'll
Yeah.
get to that.
I mean, I'll say it also just speaks to how arbitrary, the doctrine of discovery was, right?
That's
Like,
it.
who's to say, aren't we all from somewhere? The doctrine of discovery saying, well, here's a nowhere, but if they happen to look like us, will we still call them nowhere, or will we still say this was nowhere, or will we say this is somewhere? Well, we've also called it nowhere, called Northern England nowhere, because we can extend our sovereignty over that territory, and extend our economic interest over that territory. So it's
Rome
another
versus
reminder.
Sparta.
Primarily with the British Empire, yes, colonialism and oppression did have this ethnic skin color aspect to it.
I mean, even look at Germans versus Russia in World War II. It's like,
Mm,
you know, light
yeah,
skinned, but at the same time, the Germans thought they were one peoples, and
true.
the Russian Slavic people were meant to be mowed down. And
Yeah. Well, the whole
so,
Aryan conception, right? That eugenic conception.
right. Um, we're getting to some dark places with these apps.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
we should. It's this is the point.
right.
Truth
But yeah,
and
that's right.
reconciliation. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think obviously when we think of indigenous, we think of the Native Americans, Maori, of course, and of course Native Africans, but Native Slavic people, Native Irish, Native,
Hmm.
Native Ottoman, Native, Arabic peoples.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, it everyone's somewhere, like we say. Um, you know, uh, but to go into the next topic, I think one of the things that I would like to see a lot more from Star Wars, especially we talked about the Tuscans.
Hmm.
The Tuscans got a lot of development, I think, compared to the Gungans and the Ewoks. Although the Ewoks got their own cartoon in the 80s,
Sure.
and a couple of movies. But it'd be nice. I think there would be something said about if we're gonna have these cultures.
Yeah.
Get some people, get some actual native people to write down these cultures, much
Yeah.
like how Mike Chen did with the Nemoidians,
True. I
and
agree.
develop these people. Like if you want the he wants to be the Viet Cong allegory,
Hmm.
it's a very loose allegory in my opinion, but
Yeah.
that's just me. Get a person from Vietnam to write an Ewok story then and develop the Ewok
Yeah.
culture. We have a little bit of stuff that we brought back from the movie about like why there are big old traps and stuff like that, but like
Right.
really go into it. Get if Ahmed Best wants to write, have him write a story about the culture of the Gungans. Then
Yeah.
that'd be cool, right? Like develop these cultures. Just don't make them the typical, Wisa, right?
Right.
Actually, like here, their culture, here's their structure and their hierarchy. You know,
Hmm.
build into that. I think that would very much be kind of the way to go for it. You
Yeah.
go do the depths. Just don't see like random like here the lemur people for a day and then we leave. Right? Like really hone into it as you can. I think that's what we love about the Tuscans so far. We honed into it for a little bit. Um, yeah, when we've gone back, but we did for a time hone into it. Like we now know they use sign language.
Hmm.
Yes, Tuscan Jedi. We love Tuscan Jedi.
Yeah, and I just want to talk about the Gungans for a bit, and I've always thought about that. I mean, about all my best, because I mean the accent, for example, the voice, that was, as we know, I mean that was what he on my best, the voice he made up for his niece, right,
Mhm.
to entertain her, and we thought it was racist. We thought it was terrible, and we thought Gungans are coded as racist. Then there's possibly aspects of that, right? Um, like saying is the second attempt to do a native story, and an overall mixed result because they're limited. We don't see much of them, but it does. Again, it really brings up these issues, and especially issues. Even in the universe story with the Naboo coming in later, pushing the Ewoks underwater, saying, "Yeah, that's very clear." Context of reserves, right? Otogunga, it's a beautiful, thriving city, and so not perfect allegory here, but a perfect metaphor here. But um, yeah, it's funny. I've always thought our reaction to Jar Jar says everything about us and less about Jar Jar. That's kind of one of my prequelist tenets here. But specifically in this, if I'm my best developing this character, I guess it's complicated because there are some stereotypes in there. But also to say, you know, Patois is a real language. And if this is derived intentionally from Jamaican Patois, then why don't we actually show it more respect? Right? Why don't we say, actually, this is how real people speak, and it's just different and strange to us, but it's a dialect of English that when we don't fully it's hard. It's not very comprehensive or not comprehensive. It's a very comprehensive language, right? It's not mutually what the word is mutually comprehensible, whatever the word is to English to like standard North American European English, but um yeah, I think it also starts to bring up these issues. And yeah, you're right. Like I want that. I want all my best to do that. Uh now that there's a lot more respect, I think. Again, the prequels thing, we won out. We won the day. Yeah, some people are so annoyed. Maybe that they're just specifically annoyed by Jar Jar, who is an annoying character intentionally to needle people and to needle Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. But yeah, let's tell more stories. I mean, there was again a bit more in Clone Wars. Took the time to tell these stories, and it's Clone Wars. They're kind of weird, but they're on
I mean,
Naboo,
there was some good
and Mace
stuff in.
Windu takes them seriously, and I think Mace Windu is involved in that. Mace Windu takes them seriously. I think Jar Jar is involved in saving the day there. There's that hilarious arc on Rhodia, but there are these serious stories that there's also more of a need to have serious stories that take the Gungans seriously as they are and
I mean,
as their legend, that lore. And talking about that lore, why were they? Let's get that story. I think it might be. I guess it has to be before High Republic, but maybe let's get that story of how did they get pushed away when the Naboo first came. What
yeah,
happened there?
yeah, because we think of Naboo and we think of it as one of the good planets.
Mhm.
The good planets.
Yeah,
Like they're the good guy. That's where Padme comes from. So it's got to be a good planet, right?
yeah,
But like, well, wait, no. Even the place now is like the Naboo kind of drove out the Gungans
yeah.
and made them go underwater. Like they're the colonizing people, and obviously that's where Palpatine comes from. So
Yes, it's where Palpatine's from. I will say, I mean, what Padme does in Episode One, that is very much a model of truth telling and reconciliation, right? Saying, we are, I mean, there's this desperate need in the moment, but yeah, someone like Padme who has that value and has that imagination to go think outside the normal ways she's been raised in a way, right? We know she's been raised to have compassion and curiosity for those who are different, but also, the way, centuries of Naboo culture has been raised, as Boss Nass says, they think they think they're so smart. I think they're up on
their
the surface,
brains
right?
so big.
They think their brains so big, as in they think Naboo's brains are small, or Gungan's brains are small. and Padme says, "No, let's work together in this military strategy, and hopefully building towards a more peaceable society and relationship."
I
Yeah,
remember
even
the
having
book.
Jar Jar as representative, right?
I remember the book that I actually remember the book, and I remember in some behind the scenes stuff. Apparently, George almost decided that Jar Jar was going to assimilate more as a representative and like lose the Wisa, and like
Interesting.
right, like Luke Skywalker, thank you. Then he'll kind of revert back to his more anything. Which I guess can get into our last point and something I know you've had the notes. Don't worry, I did not forget
All right, all right.
the core versus the outer rim.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this kind of culminates in everything because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, unfortunately, kind of all about power, and kind of how history has and unfortunately how our society developed and kind of like haves and have-nots, right? Like I was
Yeah.
talking earlier about like the Aldani people, and yes, they're white skinned, but it's like even their
Mm-hmm.
white is not a universal thing. Got
Yeah.
German white or the Slavic people.
Yeah.
In
The
World War
Aldani
II.
are also a bit of an exception here, right? Like,
Yeah,
again, most of these are like Ewoks and Gungans and
right.
and Tuscans.
And unfortunately, like the Irish, of course, and Scottish.
Yeah.
A little bit. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, our world we have developed a core. The U.S., Europe, the first world,
Mm-hmm.
as used to be called, um, is the core of kind of the world power. It sounds a little conspiratorial, but it's kind of true of the world
Yeah.
powers. While kind of Africa, South America, a little bit of Asia, China's kind of the weird exception right now. It's
Yeah.
periphery. And Star Wars, plays to that where it's like Coruscant, Alderaan, yeah, Chandrila, Corellia. They're the U.S. and Europe. They're the core, and they're
Literally,
going out.
they call them the core worlds.
Yeah, they're literally the core, and then they go out and literally they colonize the frontier,
Mm-hmm.
and that, and while we haven't seen a lot of it in Star Wars storytelling,
Yeah.
we see a little bit in like Empire stuff. Um, we know that natives were driven out of their homes, their
Mm-hmm.
plans completely changed, right? We know that with the Gungans.
Yeah.
Obviously, that had to happen with Tatooine, where Hutts aren't native to Tatooine.
Yeah.
Humans probably aren't native to Tatooine. Maybe they are. But Owen Brew certainly aren't natives. I mean, they probably grew up there, but
Yeah.
great 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 granddaddy Lars probably wasn't.
Right.
Skywalkers weren't. They actually weren't. If you actually reread Phantom Menace, Anakin doesn't say he was born on Tatooine. They just came there.
Interesting.
With Gardula the Hutt. They were her slaves.
Right.
Um, you know, and so Star Wars has always tried to, and it's been more in paper canon than the books than the screen stuff. Although the screen stuff kind of shows it, but more in a rural urban divide where it's like the core are the cities.
Yeah.
Um, Yep, all the clones are Maori. We talked about that. We brought it up about the Maori and some of the questionable implications with the tactic clones. Um, uh, but,
Rural
urban
foreign
divide.
periphery.
There's like got evil Coruscant, especially the Empire times, and then you got frontier Tatooine. It's tough, but it's home.
Yeah.
Um, And I think that's always sort of been in the DNA of Star Wars, especially 'cause, again,
Mm-hmm.
as to quote my friend Dodge Ferris, Star Wars is a very rural franchise, and because of that, that's how we kind of portray our indigenous people. Sometimes again negatively, like in A New Hope, unfortunately, and then more times positively, like in The Mandalorian and even Return of the Jedi, where it's like
Yeah.
as much as I have a little bit of qualm with the Ewok Viet Cong thing, a little bit, I think it could have been a little more sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
It's still trying to play on that trope a little bit. Like, it's like, hey, these natives are taking down the technological terror empire.
Yeah.
Root for them because we don't like those people with their fancy technology and their tanks.
Right.
Because they probably all come from the city. So, yeah. What do you want to, Matthew? Do you want to I'll turn to
So
you.
I think the big thing I wanted to really get into is this overall story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the original trilogy is more rural, and everything with Tatooine. I'm gonna think about that because
I'll send you
the
their
prequels,
video.
the prequels do both, especially right. There's a lot on Coruscant. There's a lot about Coruscant in the prequels. Um, More than that, yeah. And so here's an interesting point. Just so that is a lot about currencies and economics in Legends. But anyway, Legends we can contribute to the conversation, no problem.
Oh, yeah.
So thanks for the comment. One thing I do want to pick up though is this larger theme within core and outer rim tensions. Like you've hit on it. There is a clear metaphor for colonialism, as you mentioned, but it goes through in the expanding empire, and it starts all the way in High Republic. And this was one of the things I was curious about when when High Republic started, is would it actually start to tell the story? It hasn't really so much tell the story of tensions between core and outer rim, um, because it's focused on actually it said the folks who are on the outer rim who want to oppose the Republic, they're actually the villains, and they're these brutal Nile marauders. There is maybe something about the peaceable community in phase 2 with the Path of the Open Hand on Dalna, but of course they get corrupted from within. So that what we do have are the great works, and is the great fair and Valo, and on the temples on Quen, and the rebuilding of Quen, for example. And it's definitely a more benign. We are all the Republic. Are we all the Republic? Right? Who said we're all the Republic? That's the thing. The Nile are bristling against, but it does seem to be more accepted as a place of a bit more like what the UN maybe tried to be, almost like the Federation. We're a meeting place, a place we can all come and gather. Starlight Beacon represented that. The Val Fair was going to represent that. The things the Nile specifically target and destroy in phase 1, right? So it's benign, but what if, like you're saying, like you said about half an hour ago, we something that's benign can develop bad habits later on or over time, and can have the seeds of something more corrupt and rotten later on, right?
Funny enough, that was brought up in a discussion I had a while ago.
Yeah. And so I think that is something that the Luminous authors were consciously doing, was saying, yes, in confronting the Nile threat, Lena So is an unabashedly benign leader who is does have the common good at heart. And this is because, as a way of saying, or not a way of saying, this is part of the galaxy being in its golden age, in this great era of collaboration and harmony, at least seeking the well-being. People have this norm to seek the well-being of the galaxy, right?
Right.
That these are the heroes. So that I do want to go through, because it's jump ahead 200 years later. Actually, if you want to make comments specifically about the High Republic, go ahead.
Yeah, this is about the High Republic. So yeah, I agree. I think the High Republic Initiative probably won't get into this. I think they want to show a more positive experience for the galaxy.
Mhm.
But I think, like you said, I think if we ever get Chris Kemshaw's Fall of the Republic book, we want to synthesize the prequel with the High Republic and a little bit of Acolyte in between. We can see that kind of some of these benign thoughts could turn sour. In fact, I want to highlight something on Twitter I saw a couple weeks ago. They brought up a really good point by Darth Zara, who said, this is the kind of dark side of the High Republic, where you see the formation of pan-galactic national identity happening in real time before your eyes.
Yeah.
We are all the Republic, whether you like it or not. That sort of good ideals, good sentiments of, hey, let's all come together.
Mhm.
That can eventually become nationalism. We're all the republic. You're not the republic? Die, separatist scum.
Yeah.
And I think, that is sort of and we won't see it in the initiative, I don't think, but it's sort
No.
of the longer term effects of that sort of benignness can become corrective if not
Yeah.
looked upon.
So
Uh,
that's my next point
right,
is that where we do see it in that is the late republic, right?
right,
Where we see that expanding presence of the republic throughout the galaxy um, turn into outright warfare in the name of democracy, in the name of galactic unity. You know that the separatists, at least what we see in the Clone Wars, and that's specifically meant to be this slanted view a little bit. We know it's led by a Sith Lord. We know it's been engineered. We know it's led by corporations. So we can question just how democratic it is. But uh, you we know that the Republic is led by a Sith Lord. We know the Republic has all these corporate interests at heart. Revenge of the Sith, especially, leads us to question. And the parts of Clone Wars, the presence of the Trade Federation senator and the Camino senator a little bit. And, we can question how democratic it is. Um, you know, the periphery. And that's the thing about the time of the late Republic. What it being, the periphery being welcomed into this wider galactic family in the High Republic, the late Republic. Um, they're suffering. And people are there. The people, the indigenous peoples of all these, of all these planets who had been invited in to this expanding galactic family. Now they're suffering to benefit the core. And so you get one of my favorite quotes in the whole Mandoverse by Christopher Plummer. Count Dooku was a visionary, right? This belief that he was actually standing up for local populations. And it's funny that can be taken both ways. Oddly enough, you think of it like the rural tensions that can be taken in the sense of, I'm a farmer, uh, I'm a settler from a couple centuries ago, and now this Coruscant government is telling me to, well, this Alberta government, this Canadian government is telling me to pay a carbon tax and invest in renewable resources that also end up benefiting the the folks in the reservation down the road more than maybe it benefited me in the past. How dare they? Or you can say, yeah, it's um, the extractive policies that that we've talked about, right? It's funny. I think the way I kind of break it down in a way, and this is very much a real world comment, and in Star Wars, I think it tends to align the two a little bit. Um, you know, white rural folks in the prairies, they are skeptical. They're incredibly skeptical of government, and it's the same in the U.S. Right? It
oh,
is the rural urban divide is the same in Canada as the U.S. Right?
pretty
That
much.
they're skeptical of central government, skeptical of higher taxes and whatnot, completely enamored with corporations who have come to supposedly, build up their communities and invest in give them great jobs, and will get their cars running, and with farmers, pay them to use I mean, the oil sands in Alberta, right? Pay them to use to drill on their land, and give them a cut of whatever oil comes through, right? Um, Indigenous communities, they're skeptical of governments because they just don't do anything, but they are going to be more skeptical of corporations who kind of march on their land and try and build pipelines through their land. I mean, that was a whole huge conflict. Is this pipeline, this oil pipeline that would go through all these lands, and there were some militias got out. It was kind of testy. Of course, the government didn't do much. So all that to say, I mean, Star Wars does have room to go into it more. I think, even Mina Monteri, we see Count Dooku as a freedom fighter, standing up for these local populations,
Which local populations, though?
but potentially ones who can be victimized by extractive industries. And this is where we get kind of the full moving from my third point. We get to the full. It's not just a metaphor anymore with the Galactic Empire. It's a full on, literally the Galactic Empire, and it's telling that the Separatists, by and large, join the Rebel Alliance, right? It's
Actually,
telling that.
no.
I mean, from what I understand, I mean, at least the stories we've seen, right? That a lot of separatists we've seen have joined the rebels. At least there's a common cause with that. I think that's a very interesting story to tell. In
I hope
that,
Andor season 2 tells it more.
yeah, right. And Andor was one of the first, in Rogue One, that quote in Rogue One. I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old, and the show kind of fudges with that, but to say, yeah, these local populations who have their cultures and have their ways of sustaining their communities, and this is what we necessarily part of what might mean by indigenous, right? Is people who are from this land who have a more intimate relationship to this land, and know how to sustain it and have a reciprocal relationship to their land. Know to sustain it, know how to relate to it so it sustains them, their food and water, and just where they live and shelter. And along comes the Empire, and we literally see this on screen with Lothal. Is another great example here. Again, the kind of white, as was coded as Jewish, is the Empire coming
Well, the
and
live
ripping.
action actor is a lot. Certainly got
Yeah. Yeah.
not quite.
Yeah, that's true. And so, like, full on ripping up the planet. It's this naked exploitation and oppression. I wouldn't be surprised. We get a story about, we've talked about stormtroopers. I mean, it's the volunteers. If there is conscription, if there is, I mean, that's the thing is Star Wars hasn't full on gone there with the type of thing. I'll go in a minute to the point of residential schools where it has gone there slightly, hinted at it, at least where my mind goes. But yeah, it mostly goes at the extractive aspects of it. But I mean, Andor, the Aldani was really one of the clearest examples to me of that. So, do you have any thoughts on the late Republic and the Empire in this metaphor?
Yeah. So that's a good comments. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, that's where it can go. It's like we are all American can mean the progressive liberal kind of. We all have different cultures, but we all live in this one nation state. Or we're all American. We don't want anybody else here that doesn't look like a specific type of person.
Yeah.
Boom. Now, obviously, I think both are somewhat problematic because of how America was founded, of course, and colonialism there, and probably in a perfect world we can need a constitution change. But yeah, but that's in terms of a galactic community. Again, we're all a republic can mean all these different cultures that have decided to voluntarily, of their own free will and volition, have joined up for the betterment of each other,
for a more perfect union.
Right, or we are all the republic. We are the state. You will belong to us, or else we don't want you even.
Right.
We will crush you. So yeah, it's light side. They got light side and dark side to that. I'd be interested if like the epitome of a residential school for Star Wars would be like, I don't know, kids with force sensitivity gets kidnapped but taught in the way of the dark side instead. Baby Inquisitors. They
I
might be a
mean,
little too on the nose and maybe not respectful. I don't know. I probably should not be the one writing that story, quite frankly.
the Church of England sponsoring residential schools was the dark side. Full
Yes.
stop.
Yes. I probably shouldn't be the one writing that story. Get a
Sure.
native Canadian to write that story
Yes.
for Star Wars.
They're out
Uh,
there. There's plenty of talent. So much talent.
yeah,
Yeah.
they probably would tell it better than I could.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, yeah, that's the Empire for you. Let me check the notes in case we missed anything. I think we got up most
Yeah.
of a lot.
I did want to mention one last thing, and I mentioned, I mentioned this a few times, right? While during our Acolyte reviews, like
Oh yeah,
why does everything with Soul does my mind go to the way we tell the story of the residential schools? And why is that? There's some, it's a smaller little example. It's one girl, Osha, but to me it really does exemplify, and it with Soul it ends up being a cautionary tale that denialism is still a thing. Very clearly, and I thought about it. It is this last thing I want to say. First of all, because it's a kid who, you know yeah, she wants to go, but she's still taken from her parents, taken from her culture by some. I mean, we see with Soul and with Torben, I think it's Torben, folks who don't understand the culture and think it's dangerous, think these witches are evil and harmful. Soul doesn't take the time to dialogue and listen and learn. Takes her away to a religious school called the Jedi Academy, called the Jedi Temple, where she becomes a Padawan, right?
right.
While in the process destroying her family, destroying her culture and identity and heritage. Yes, the Jedi Council, it's not a perfect parallel. The Jedi Council said no, leave them be. Um, there are questions about why this group is illegal, why they can't train. That's what I love about that episode 3. It doesn't tell you either way if they're right, if there's a good reason or a bad reason, or like a reason that they're actually dangerous, or it's just racism and fear of people who are different. Um, even during the time of the residential schools, there were different ideas, and there were folks fighting against them and saying this is horrible and evil, but they weren't successful in reversing the policy. Right. Here's the stat: the last residential school closed in your lifetime, Joel. In our lifetime. Again, by that point, it was also more benign, but still, there were. It has this legacy of being the primary instrument of cultural genocide. So, to carry on this memory, to hold that memory, and that's the thing with Soul. This cautionary tale. To his dying day, he thought he was civilizing Osha, and that's the thing with the residential schools, that they thought they actually this is the wildest, the scariest thing. And can you mention a benign thing that turns out to be corrupted and evil? The residential schools, the people who were running them, thought they were doing those kids a service by civilizing them and by making them respectable Christians and integrating them into society. And the result, of course, is generations of alcohol abuse and generations of depression and generations of communities that are on the margins without drinking water, without safe drinking water, without infrastructure, without the voice that they deserve in our society. Now that's definitely changing, and like I said, it's not all doom and gloom anymore. We want to celebrate native excellence, right? there are authors and artists and filmmakers there can easily find an Indigenous author to write a Star Wars. I mean, we got Rebecca Roanhorse. There's definitely one in Canada. There's thousands, probably thousands, hundreds of thousands. But we also have to stay vigilant against denialism and against anything that says anything other weakens. Again, that's what soul represents to me, is this tragedy of someone who stuck to his guns, and weakened the how terrible, even within himself. He was fighting this within himself, right? There's a part of his conscience is saying, "Oh, we're guilty. We wronged these people. We wronged Dosha. We need to be vigilant against anyone that weakens and tries to dull the edge of the residential schools, dull the edge of our responsibility to study and learn and work towards a better society, to work towards better societies with these Indigenous cultures and communities that happen to be within our state borders. But for they haven't seen Canada as home, and they've built their homes where they are and where they're from, or at least where they've ended up. And it is constantly, this is kind of my last word, I am constantly grateful that in my church, there's someone who had to stay away from church for most of his life, has come and actually is willing to dialogue and willing to help us learn through that there are Indigenous people in this city who are living and making their way, and who've extended the hand, and we have to the hand of friendship, the hand of peace, the hand of reconciliation, the hand of forgiveness. We need to take the initiative. We need to go out and advocate, be active, and in humility, like Padme, extend the hand back, and extend the hand first as well, as best we can. So Star Wars does inspire me to that. Star Wars inspires us to that. Soul is an example of what not to do. Padme, I think, great example of what to do.
Yeah, I got nothing. I think that's a good place to end it on.
Yeah,
I think we'll call it.
That's my last word there. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Yeah, good place to end. Important topic, heavy topic. I think it's Star Wars, so that's the fun thing, right? These heavier topics in ways that kids can come to understand. I think my nieces who are from the prairies and live on the prairies, they're going to be exposed to this topic, if they aren't already, in ways, and hopefully live in a world where there is a deepened reconciliation. Star Wars has a part to play in that. I think this is kind of what we're getting at. It has a part to play. It's slowly developing, slowly building on that. But as one of the great stories and myths, great stories and myths of our culture and of our time, and not just our culture, but like it's now in Navajo, it's now in Ojibwe, right? Ojibwe. It's in all the languages, so many languages around the world. One of the great myths of our time can really be a place of truth telling and reconciliation and building a better world. So good place to wrap things up. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. Let us know what you thought of our conversation tonight, again, especially about Star Wars and Indigenous there. And I will say, I saw this, yes, except that there's a good kind of pride that our Indigenous neighbors are called to. And when they raise the flag of their ethnicity, yeah, the Canadian flag, I love Canada. It's fine. Not fine. There's lots of them, but it's complicated. I'll say that. Yes, but definitely, yeah. Thanks for chiming in. I definitely appreciate the comment, all your comments there. From Aotearoa, New Zealand, I believe. But yeah, please do let us know what you thought of this conversation, especially uh, Indigenous stories, colonialism, imperialism, and Star Wars as well. But also, the Jedi video game question. If you read Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, Padawan's Pride, listen to Padawan's Pride, Tears of the Nameless, please do comment below. Some great books, great talking about all that. Talking about imperialism and colonialism, I'm sure, in Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire.
Oh yeah, well. And genocide. They got genocide in here too, and intolerance. There's a whole chapter about that.
That's Star Wars for you, like in ways we can engage these things in ways that entertain us and enjoy us. We enjoy, but still manage to educate and transform us and empower us to good. I mean, that was George's whole point. So yeah, please let us know.
I'll just say, chapter 12 is prejudice and discrimination. Chapter 13 is atrocities and genocide. So,
yes, so
there you go. I should have. Honestly, I wish I used this as a reference. I could have done that for more in universe.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so let us know what you thought of our conversation tonight. What kind of Indigenous stories you want to see told in Star Wars? Please do comment below. Those boxes aren't going anywhere. On YouTube and also on Facebook, and I believe Twitch has a comment section too. Twitch videos. So please do that. Please do give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, thanks again for another great conversation, and for indulging me and saying I want to bring this up today. So let's do that. Yeah, please do. Just continue. Anyway, sorry. Where can they find you on the internet?
Find me at JID2021 to get JID2021 on Twitter. And of course, follow us at the Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONTANONPOD. And of course, you can follow me and hang out with me on the Star Wars Underworld Discord, link in the description below, where we have game nights every other Friday. And sometimes we watch movies and chit chat and have other events. So take a look.
There you go. Yeah. Check that link description below. Link in the description below. You can follow me on Instagram at MNEUG1138 and at beaches.foodie. Some good ice cream photos up there too. You can see my photo of I took a photo of the festivities at Toronto City Hall today, just outside there in the big square there, Nathan Phillips Square. On MNEUG1138, also Twitter, NEUG485. I'm also Threads, MNEUG1138. I should mention that. Of course, at Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Again, this Wednesday on the Tractor Beam, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Inquisitors number 4 a little bit, but then Battle of Jakku, Insurgency Rising number 1. We're gonna dive right into that. Definitely worth. It will be a day long remembered in comics. Hopefully it's good. There we go, Alex Segura. No pressure, but yeah, please do check that out. Also, of course, the flagship at the SWU. Check them out Thursday night at 9. Everything hand is up to over on the race side. I guess Tales from the Galaxy, they're doing a little bit. Marty's Star Wars Culture live podcast. Check that one out as well.
Yes,
that's
please.
On the Star Wars Culture YouTube, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Subscribe to that channel, please, and watch our videos.
Culture, YouTube, go give that a look. But yeah, next week I'll be away because I'll be picking my parents up from the airport. But Joel, you got one called Revolution.
And how it's portrayed in Star Wars.
There we go. So interesting, probably picking it up from tonight's episode. I'm guessing some things, but yeah, very intriguing topic. So yeah, please do come back right here, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Underworld YouTube channel and Facebook and Twitch and Ion Cannon Twitch. We still got that going. So yeah, please do check that out. But until then, let's blow this thing and head home.